let's talk about some special right triangles. Now, these two special right triangles come from cutting an equilateral triangle in half and cutting a square in half. So let's say we have a square. Now, squares, we know they have right angles, and all their sides are the same. So let's just say all these sides of this square were x. Then when we cut that in half, that meant we cut these two 90-degree angles in half, and that's where we got our 45s. And we know two sides, so therefore, we could use the Pythagorean theorem to solve for our hypotenuse. X squared plus x squared equals c squared. X squared plus x squared is 2x squared equals c squared. Then when I take the square root of each side, I'm going to say the square roots cancel for the x, but there's no squared around the 2. I'm just going to leave it as the square root of 2. So c equals the square root of 2, which is where I'm getting this expression. Now, what's really nice about these special right triangles is because you know one side, you can then know all the other sides instead of having to know two sides. A very similar process was done in order to set up this special right triangle. Let's say we had an equilateral triangle. So equilateral triangle means all the sides are the same, all the angles are the same. So all the angles are 60, and all the sides, we're just going to call them 2x for now. Okay, let's say we cut that in half. Now, if we cut that in half, well, half of 2x is just x. This is 30 now, and what's left over would make this 90. So we again have two sides, and we can solve for our third side, where 2x is our hypotenuse. So we have x squared plus b squared, I don't know what it is, equals 2x squared. 2x squared is 4x squared, because remember, you got to distribute your exponents. So you have x squared plus bx squared equals 4x squared. Subtract x squared from each side. And you got b squared equals 3x squared. Last step is going to be to take the square root. And b is going to equal, well, the square roots will cancel. The square and the square root will cancel for the x. There's no squared around the 3, so it'll be x squared 3. And that's where we're getting that expression. Now let's actually use this information. We're going to be copying these triangles down, so you might want to have them in your notes. Let's find the value of x. Your answer must be exact. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy down. I see this is a 45-degree angle, and this is a 90-degree angle, so I know I'm dealing with a 45, 45, 90 triangle. And we just learned on the last page, that means this is x, and this is x times the square root of 2. Now I can set up a ratio or an equation in order to solve. I probably should have used something other than x here, since x is already my variable. Let's go ahead and change that. Instead of using x's, let's just use y's. Just another variable, that way we don't mix anything up. Now, I look at corresponding sides. I see that the square root of 2 times y is coordinating to 8 times the square root of 2, which means if those are coordinating, I can set them equal to each other and solve for y. Now, if I solve for y, I'm going to divide by the square root of 2 on each side. That'll cancel, that'll cancel. It looks like y is equal to 8. So if I plug that in on this triangle, this is an 8, this is an 8, this is an 8. Okay, now what coordinates? This side and this side. So x is equal to 8. Okay, let's try doing that in a different way on this problem. people have trouble if I represented the formula as x, 2x, and x times the square root of 3. Some people like to put a 1 in for x. And so what they'll do instead is have 1, 2, square root of 3. Now, what this lends itself to is setting up a proportion. So we see this side and this side corresponds to this side and this side. So then I can say 4 over x is equal to 2 over 1. Then we can cross multiply and solve. Now, both ways are just as valid. We're going to work both just so you can see. So we have x times 2, 4 times 1, 2x equals 4, divide by 2, divide by 2, and x equals 2. Whichever way you want to approach this problem, that's the way you should. So we're going to do one more as ratios. So normally I would say, hey, we have this 45, 45, 90 triangle. So we have x, x, and x times the square root of 2. But if I plug in a 1 for x, then that gives me 1, 1, and the square root of 2. I see that this corresponds to this. And so I have 13 over x equals the square root of 2 over 1. Then you can do your cross multiplication. 13 times 1 is 13. X times the square root of 2 is x times the square root of 2. And then when you solve for x, we'll divide by the square root of 2. X is equal to 13 over the square root of 2. Since they wanted an exact form, we're going to leave it just like that. This is another 45, 45, 90. I'm going to go ahead and use the ratios again. So I see that the x corresponds to the square root of 2, and 16 corresponds to 1. So x over 16 is equal to square root of 2 over 1. So we'll do our cross multiplication. And x is equal to 16 times the square root of 2. All right, let's do another ratio on this one. Notice how whenever I draw my triangle, I'm reorienting it to be kind of matching. I have 1, 2, square root of 3. Now I see some corresponding pieces. I see 11 corresponds to 1. That's right, x over 11. So you said 11 corresponds to 1 and x corresponds to 2. So let's do our cross multiplication. X times 1 is x. 2 times 11 is 22. Let's do another. So we have 1, 2, the square root of 3, where this is 30 and this is 60. Start with x over 10. Always just start with the one that I know. I know x is corresponding to square root of 3. And 10 is corresponding to 1. So I'll cross multiply again. And x is going to be equal to 10 times the square root of 3. Let's solve this one. 1, 1, square root of 2, because it's 45, 45, 90. You always want to just check one of your angles. make sure you're using the special right triangle. So this one's the 45, so we know it's 45, 45, 90. Let's go ahead and set x over 20 as our first fraction. X is corresponding to 1. 20 is corresponding to the square root of 2. Cross multiply. X times the square root of 2 equals 20. Divided by the square root of 2, divided by the square root of 2. And x is equal to 20 divided by the square root of 2. Remember, you can enter that as a fraction by clicking that button. And good luck on Get More Math.